Hi everyone, just getting back to you about the current real estate hunt for a rental. I looked at 3 properties today and I applied for 2 of those. The other one, I still have to get the link for the application. And also on Thursday evening, I submitted an application for another property, so I'm throwing myself in the ring, I know. Hopefully not through the ringer. But one of the reasons why, besides, the squeezed amount of time and the pressure of logistics and um, getting enough kind of liquidity to make this move, it would have been different if it was in a month or so because I'd get my tax return and that would cover most of it. But I just have very few funds. Yeah, and that doesn't look good when you make applications if they ask for bank balances, which most of them haven't, thankfully. But it's not just that, it's also because there were periods of my life where I had even greater difficulty with housing. And so I'm going to read something that is broadly biographical, autobiographical. It's called Real Estate, very simple title. Real estate. We had no money and no quick means of getting it. To make matters worse, no real estate in town would even consider our application. Every receptionist aped the other, smiling moronically behind painted lips and lacquered dead hair. Yes, we'll telephone you as soon as the owner has reached a decision. No, the matter is yet to be finalised. Yes, you can try phoning on Monday. At midday, if you like. We should know by then. No, the house hasn't been leased to anyone yet. Please be patient. Wherever we went, the same tune. We had references, yes. We had the foresight to be creative, to put it another way, with our sources. What else could we have done? I was beginning to realize we had nowhere to go. And staying at the hotel, famous for its family feel of psychotics in adjacent rooms and drunk wife bashers across the hall, could only last so long. Till tomorrow, that is. Between us, we had not a cent to our names. Salome was optimistic. So this comes from a greater novel. I found myself slipping into a vague state of panic. 4 months in Melbourne, having torn away from Perth. Already I'd landed in this mess. At least there was Salome. I rang a housing crisis line, only to be given 4 names, all of which turned us down. No, we don't have any spaces, sorry. Or, we cannot house friends together anyway, was the customary dismissive response. It was like doing the rounds with the real estate again. I rang I rang the last contact on a list given me by the Salvation Army. It got through. Bit of a pause because I'm trying to find the text. It got through. The call with the Salvation Army. This takes place in the 1990s. Come and see us tomorrow for an interview at 1:45 p.m. My name's Maria. I'm the housing officer, and we'll see what we can do. Do you know where we are? Yes, St Kilda, right? Fitzroy Street. Good. See you then. Some consolation. I'd do anything to get into this program. Otherwise, I knew things would surely spin out of control. I turned up 10 minutes early to the appointment. A woman wearing a red vinyl jacket with her hair in a corkscrew in her 30s, was smoking a cigarette out the front of the centre. I assumed she was a client. As I approached, she looked at me quizzically, then leaned forward. I'm Maria. Oh, hi. Am I late? No, you're early. I'm just having a fag. Why don't you come in and sit down? I'll be with you in a sec, okay? Okay, thanks. I sat there, flicking rapidly through the piles of Woman's Day and New Idea, Not really reading, but taking in the headlines and the blurry exclusive photographs. Melanie Griffith and hubby Antonio caught nude on beach. Madonna hits out at anti-fur campaigners. Robert Downey Jr. on drugs again. I only digested the large print, mulling over my own story, which would have to be equally sizzling, controversial, I thought, to be taken seriously by these social workers. They saw all types, some of them worse off than me, probably. What was my case? I felt a sharp sense of guilt, akin to when I get called a whinger at home for any and everything. Such was my reputation. Weak, spoiled girl. More often than not, overheard words. My father's. Maybe it was true. I had nothing to complain about. I broke out in a sweat. My stomach grumbled. I would have to be as creative as any sub-editor of a scandal sheet. The public had to know, didn't they? I saw myself in one of those articles, framed in red. Story of a runaway was one headline. Another brave victim speaks out. I laughed at the corniness of it. Hadn't I lived a normal life? I was alive. I predicted their responses. Come on, you're bright. Emphasize the positive, as my mother might say, or more brutally, we can only help those who can't help themselves. I felt like leaving. I was a phony, fraud. I had nothing to say. I had suffered nothing. I had brought all this misery on myself. Before I could get up, Maria entered the waiting room. Yes, you can come through now. Maria offered me a coffee, which I declined, politely. I did not want to feel any more jittery than I already was. A Valium might have helped. I rooted myself to the metal chair. Maria introduced me to a blonde woman in a seat next to her by the name of Carol. Carol was extraordinary. She wore several layers of pancake makeup, and over her lips she applied a bright red lip liner which finished in two alpine peaks on the top. She was my worker proper. They never said social worker. And I would be seeing her every week. She would look after my needs, assess my weekly progress. Carol, however, was the source of much gossip amongst the kids. On her left cheek, under layers of frosted foundation, you could discern evidence of a slight scar, about an inch long, which she did her best to hide. Watching her talk was weird, and I tried to stay serious. That was vital today. I couldn't show any degree of lightheartedness here. That was not on the script. Hi there. Just a few questions to begin. Maria tells me you're from Perth. How long have you been in Melbourne? Yeah, I moved from Perth about 4 months ago, so I've been living here since June. Since June this year. You arrived February 1992, right? Any family? They live in Perth. Do they know where you live? Do they know you live here? Is it possible to get support from them? No, I left without saying goodbye. And no, they wouldn't support me. They can't. I mean, they've never really supported me. Financially? No, I mean, yes, but in all other ways. We don't have what you'd call a good relationship, you know, me and my parents. So you don't get along with them, not even with your mother. That's what I said. In that moment, I felt as if I dealt my mother a swift blow. I was like Peter denying her 3 times. I never knew you. I never knew you. I never loved you. Not how someone would treat their mother. Judgment weighed heavily on me. I could feel it. Irreversible. There was no point holding back. I'd already contravened the universal law. Wasn't I myself an aberration? This is something perhaps this woman could never comprehend. She was part of the normal, acceptable world. She had family, parents who loved her, paid for her education, or even got an education. What separated us? I had come here to find somewhere to live. All other doors slammed in my face. But I'd have to reduce myself to visual rubble to get anywhere. A cry nearly cracked its way to the surface, but I scotched it. I bent my head down, talking to the carpet. Here, as usual, I was giving account. What did she see, looking at me? Why couldn't they just get it over and done with? They would probably say no. They couldn't help me just now. Suddenly, I sensed I had no place in the world. It was better I didn't exist. There, I was helpless. Scrape me up from the floor. Wash that blood up. She can't cope with who I am, I offered. That was sure to elicit some response. It was the 1990s. The talk shows were full of it. Carol looked like the kind of person who'd watch the talk shows, tape them if she missed them. She would enjoy all the emotional blood and guts. She won't accept your sexuality, your gender. That word again. No. My mother wouldn't accept me being anything she hadn't planned. And your father? I haven't told him. He was already threatening to put me away. I felt I was speaking someone else's life. But once I said those words, thinking back, they resounded with truth. The last time I saw my mother, we'd met for lunch in the city. It was months since I'd seen her. My mother is full of smiles and sing-song cheeriness when she waves at me from the front of the station. We lunch at an Indian restaurant. She asks the usual questions. How are you getting on? How's the asthma now you've moved? Do you see many of your old friends? I answer them mindlessly. Her conversation is nearly always like this, mindless. To my mother, small talk is pivotal. She is constantly avoiding the topic. But not today. I won't allow it. We finish our pumpkin dal and I go for seconds. I need to fortify my stomach for the afternoon ahead. With characteristic aplomb, she refuses a second helping. Always a self-sacrificing one, not to be seen as excessive. It's that look of pride that I hate, the way she stares at me like I'm some object and doesn't listen to what I have to say. I may as well be a Stepford child, a good Anglo-Indian boy. That's what she wants, loyal, self-effacing. But this afternoon, she doesn't get what she wants. We make the journey back to the suburb, and I know it will be the last time. I'm careful to ascertain if my younger brother is liable to be in or out. My mother assents. He's gone off driving in his V8 with his friends. On the way there, I thought this is where the rift starts. This is where I wave goodbye to my mother as a passenger on a cruise liner bound for some distant country. A long trip, possibly for life, signals goodbye to the fast disappearing friend on the docks. I could see her as a black speck blinking on the horizon until she no longer existed, except as memory. But no, that rift had started much earlier. It was hard to say precisely when. It was only that now some spell had been broken. I had stopped believing in her, or so I thought. I felt sad for this woman, who had never known me. At the same time, I was angry beyond words. Anger felt like privilege. It surged through my veins. My mother hated emotions. I began to see her beauty as the beauty of a mannequin, a wax figure, someone who rarely breathed. She was so controlled. I remembered those days, those long days after I left school, halfway through year 12, sleeping holed up in my bedroom, completely lost. 7 months 7 months of walking into a coma of languidness. I would draw flowers. I drew an outline of my body, but I tore it up. My mother pushed food over the threshold dutifully, and mail under the door. She accepted this without word. She did not want to know. Glandular fever, she told her friends, struck down, just like I was before the brother went and their father had to hire home help. Like any commander, she schooled her cadets in the utmost self-discipline. Just a glance was warning enough, or the threat of no speaks. Efficiency is the way. If there was a parson down there, it was lost beneath all the artifice of poise. And mimicry is the best flattery. She needed that. She, in her own way, was missing too. She rarely spoke of her parents, but in the most glowing terms. For every emotion she had a part rehearsed. That was her survival. But survival can be hollow. Looking at it now, so much is laughable. Tragicomedy, I guess. But that afternoon in her duplex, I summoned the courage to be as straightforward as possible. Agape, I can understand, but eros? Not a natural thing. What are you trying to tell me? You like men? I cannot. Why can't you just be normal? Plenty of girls like you. Annika Panika, for example, from a good family. Or Vivian's daughter from church. Mum, it's not about that. I just don't feel right. I don't know what I really feel. Nothing in our family is normal. Are you going to tell your friends at least? If you don't understand it, me being a boy, not being a boy, you should at least talk to them. I will say nothing. It's against God. I will tell them that you're asexual. My mum did actually say that. My mother looked down, picked up some knitting, and asked me when my train was due. I never saw her again. So that's a tough recount, isn't it? Sorry for the trip-ups and so on, but what happened after that was really, really challenging in my life and involved fleeing the family situation, because actually I told my mum and others about the child sexual abuse at the hands of my father, and that went down a treat, as you can imagine, ranging from they didn't know how to respond, maybe they just kind of locked it out, to my father coming for me, and I just had to go as fast as I could, but I had no safety net, no landing point really beyond one friend who let me stay with her for a week, and I endured years of homelessness, and so what is non-linear, in a non-linear way, recounted there is my first encounters with a housing crisis centre. But there's more on that front. It's just that when these things recur in my life, even when I've had more financial buffers, job security, which I didn't have back then, it brings back, I'm sorry to say, a lot of those traumas. But anyway, at least I can write about it. I hope you got something out of that reading and reflection. It's not to trigger anyone, it's just to really look at what happens when actual factors mitigate against you and can put you in a more marginal place in society.